Alright guys, so I was waiting on one more thing to get the car running. And that was this, right here. A oil restrictor banjo bolt for the turbo. Gonna run to the gas station, get some gas, run to the store, get an oil filter, put the oil in, put the coolant in, and hopefully start this thing. Well guys, interesting failure for a first start attempt. Tried to start it and all of a sudden I started hearing it grind. Like the starter was, something wasn't going on right with the starter. I've never seen anything like that. Both sides of the starter did that. And so the starter obviously had like fallen back a little bit. Okay guys, so yesterday I showed you the starter and what happened to it. I was actually able to find a new one in stock at AutoZone. So it was at the second store I went to. I just really wanted to get this thing fired up and didn't want to wait 2 weeks for a starter to get here. So I got one, and I got a few theories. Either one, what happened was, you know, how it cracked around both the bolt housings. I think what might have happened is I had a couple nasty bumps up there above the firewall and stuff like that that I've touched up, so you can't quite tell anymore as bad. But maybe the starter got banged or it got hit or something while I was trying to put the motor in, and it cracked the housing. My other theory is that the bolts weren't tight enough and it just backed off or something, which I don't really think that, because I really made sure those bolts were tight. Another theory is I could have over-tightened the bolts, but I also don't really think that's the case either. So the last theory, and I hope this one's not it, is the motor locked up and the starter could no longer turn the flywheel. So as the starter was trying to turn the flywheel, motor was locked up, motor wasn't moving, so the flywheel couldn't, or the starter couldn't spin it. So I'm going to check that theory first. I'm going to put a wrench here on the crank pulley and see if I can spin this thing. Not super easy because the spark plugs are in now and it's getting compression, which is a good thing. That's a good thing, but I didn't have a whole lot of leverage there either, so let me put this back in. Okay, well, I'm gonna put the new starter in, and fingers crossed this one doesn't explode. This is not fun, guys. If I have to tear this freaking transmission out again to replace the flywheel, I'm gonna be so upset. Put the flash on. You can see what it's doing to the teeth of this flywheel. And so it's definitely not... Something is definitely not right. Not right at all. Alright, so I finally figured out exactly what went wrong. I know what needs fixed now. And I'm not happy about it, but I'm not... It could be a lot worse. I actually went out. I went to Advanced Auto. They had a new starter in stock. So I went ahead, grabbed that starter. I installed that one. Turned the key. Same thing. I got a few cranks. Sounded good. Sounded healthy. And then all of a sudden started grinding. So I got into a few more questionable things, wondering maybe if I was sent the wrong flywheel, or another issue. I found a couple people in DSM tuners had issues with the XTD flywheel actually being a little bit smaller and or bigger than what it needed to be, because the front wheel drive flywheel is different, and like people were getting sent that by accident and that sort of thing. So once I double checked, verified all that, and figured out that that probably wasn't the issue, because I was getting a few good cranks before it was breaking. I finally discovered what the problem is. I don't remember if I added it in the video or not, but if I did, you guys might have saw it. Originally, the starter plate that goes around but in between the transmission and the bell housing, for the starter to get basically bolted in through, there's like a giant shield that goes around. It's called the starter plate. I'm sure anyone that's in DSMs probably already knows where I'm going with this. the front wheel drive automatic, the front wheel drive manual, the all wheel drive automatic, all three use the exact same starter plate. The all wheel drive manual uses a different starter plate. It's the only one that's different. The reason that is because the shaft that comes out for the transfer case, the flywheel for the all wheel drive needs to be slightly smaller to clear that. And because it's slightly smaller, rather than using a different starter, they use a different starter plate. And the transmission has different bolt holes for the starter. So what they do is they basically turn the starter downwards a little bit. It's at a slightly different angle, and it grabs the flywheel like it should. So what I did originally is I cut. What happened was, because they sent me the wrong transmission with my motor, they sent me a front-wheel drive transmission. And when I had originally looked into this, I was told that the front-wheel drive starter plate was the exact same as the all-wheel drive besides the bolt. The bolt hole location was different. So what I did was I took a Dremel with a cutoff wheel, and I cut off a little section of the starter plate. And by doing that, I figured, you know what, this will allow for the bolt to go through the starter plate, yada, yada, yada. Well, it turns out, and here's a picture from a YouTube video I found a little bit ago from 802 Garage, where basically the starter plates are very different. And so the actual hole that the starter goes in is in a slightly different location, as I said, lowered down a little bit. There we go. So I cut the plate. I don't know if you can see it on camera right now or not. Okay, I think it's right there. So I cut the plate right there to fit the bolt. Now you can see it's not the best cut job, whatever, but it did the job. It let the bolt go through. The problem is this hole for the starter to go through is actually supposed to sit just a little bit lower. But long story short, guys, I have to pull the transmission out again. That means pulling out the axles, pulling out the transfer case, and pulling the transmission out. Luckily, I didn't fill it with fluid yet because I had gear oil to put in everything, and I was about to do it. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and start this thing first. So glad I didn't do that and have to drain all the gear oil. So what I'm going to have to do now is pull everything back out, pull the transmission back out, which completely sucks because here I am thinking I'm ready to start this thing. So what I'll do, pull the axles, pull the transfer case, pull the intermediate axle, drop the transmission, disconnect everything I got to. And then once the transmission's off, I can pull the clutch off, pull the flywheel off, which hopefully won't be too bad because I just put red Loctite on those. So I'm hoping that isn't terrible, but it might be. And then once I get all that off, I can take the bolts off for the starter plate. And then what I can do then is obviously get the correct starter plate and get the another brand new starter and install both, reinstall the transmission, reinstall everything else. And, well, obviously before I go ahead and put everything else in, transfer case, axles, and all that good stuff, once I remount the transmission, I'll probably instantly try and get the thing to start again. Then if I can get it to start or at least crank without breaking the starter, that's what I'll do. So, doesn't sound like a plate could actually do that to a starter, but it does. I read around on the forums, and a lot of people said that's exactly what would happen. The starter ears, which is, the two pieces that come out for the bolts to go through, will break. Like I said, it's going to be fun pulling that plate out, and lucky for you guys, you aren't going to have to do it. You aren't going to have to watch it because when I snap my fingers, the transmission is going to be out of the car, and it'll probably be 3 days into the future. The transmission is out. It's been about 3-4 days since the last clip, and I just haven't had the time to really work on it. And today was the first day I had time. It was the first day it wasn't 90,000 degrees outside, so I got home from work and started working on it. Probably got about two and a half hours into tearing everything back apart, so not as bad as I thought it would be. But we have everything back out again. Brakes, axles, intermediate axles. The only problem I ran into at all was I already still have to, re-grease and put a new clamp on that axle. And then I don't even need the boot. I literally just need the axle clamps and an axle clamp tool but now I'm going to actually have to order a boot for this side. I could not for the life of me get this axle out, and I probably spent 30 minutes just trying to get this axle out, and I couldn't do it. I got frustrated, and I just cut the boot off so I could remove the axle. So now what I'm going to have to do is pop the rest of this out, and then I'm going to have to reboot it, reclamp it. Not a huge deal. I'm not super worried about it. Anyways, if you guys didn't already understand what I meant by the starter plate, now I'll show you. So, now that everything's back apart, I still have to take the clutch back off, and I still have to take the flywheel back out. But, as you can see, this little rusty metal plate that's behind the flywheel here, the hole for the starters right there, this is the plate that I need to remove. There's a few bolts behind the flywheel that hold this on, and so once I get all those off, I can take this plate out, and once the plate is out, then I can swap it in. Got something hanging on the camera there. Swap it in for the correct plate, put everything back together, and put the transmission back in. Alright, so I'm going to end the video here, guys. I just want to get this video out to you. It's been over a week since, almost a week since I shot the first part of this video, and I still have to edit it and everything and then upload it. So, the next video you see will hopefully be me swapping that plate out, putting the transmission back in, putting a new starter back in, and hopefully, fingers crossed, starting the freaking car. And the only thing, the only big concern that I have is going to be, first off, I'm going to be nervous about, taking everything, putting everything back together, just redoing all that. But the thing I'm going to be nervous about is obviously getting the starter, putting it on, and the same thing happening. And I might, I'm going to inspect the flywheel, see how bad the teeth are on it and that sort of thing. So just stay tuned for the next video. Hopefully we'll have this thing up and running soon. And the goal date was, I believe I said July 15th. So we're getting pretty close. It's only a week away. That's not a whole lot of time. And I'm still waiting on the plate to even ship. The plate that I'm waiting on hasn't even shipped yet. So now I have this all apart, and the plate isn't here, and it's not scheduled to be here anytime within the next few days anyway. So when it does get here, I'm going to have to hustle and get this thing put back together. And so, I don't know. Hopefully everything else is good, and I don't put this all back together just to find another weekend. But, like I said, hopefully it all goes smooth. It all goes back together the way it's supposed to, and we can get this thing moving on to the next chapter. So, anyways, I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.